What if I told you that McLaren just discovered something in Canada that could completely change Formula One in 2026? Because while everyone was watching the fight between Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes, a much bigger concern began to grow within the paddock. Oscar Piastri began to reveal feelings about the new MCL40 that left even several rival engineers frozen. And we're not just talking about a faster car. We're talking about a car that seems to have found an aerodynamic stability that no one else has right now. The most impressive thing is that Canada was not just any race for McLaren. It was the culmination of a technical project that Andrea Stella had been preparing for weeks. A package so aggressive that the team itself publicly admitted that they were practically carrying a new car. And when Piastri began to talk about the confidence he felt in fast corners, how the car maintained balance even in extreme conditions, and the ease of attacking without destroying tires, many within Formula One immediately understood that something serious was happening. Because this is not the typical performance jump that appears one race and disappears later. This seems like something much deeper. Ferrari continues to struggle with inconsistent aerodynamic windows. Red Bull continues to try to understand an extremely sensitive RB21. Mercedes still cannot find complete consistency. But McLaren seems to have unlocked a development philosophy that could be decisive for the new 2026 era. And the scariest thing for the rest of the teams is that we are just beginning to see the true potential of the MCL40. It all started long before single-seaters arrived in Montreal. While most teams were still focused on correcting immediate performance problems during the start of the 2025 season, McLaren was quietly working on something much more ambitious. Andrea Stella had already issued a warning that at the time many underestimated. The team planned to practically introduce a new car between Miami and Canada. It was neither a simple aerodynamic update nor a classic mid-season package. It was a complete reconstruction of the MCL40 philosophy. And this is where the real story begins. Because the unexpected pause in the calendar after the date changes allowed McLaren to have extra weeks of development in Woking. While other teams used that time to solve specific weaknesses, the engineers led by Andrea Stella decided to bet everything on a radical evolution of the car. What they did was directly attack the aerodynamic heart of the car. They didn't just want more speed. They wanted a car capable of maintaining performance in any conditions. That changes absolutely everything in Formula One. Because fast teams usually have a hidden problem. They depend too much on a specific operating window. Ferrari, for example, can be extremely competitive when the car reaches ideal temperature, when degradation is controlled, and when the track favors its downforce. But outside that window, the SF25 begins to show dangerous inconsistencies. Red Bull is experiencing something similar with the RB21. The car is still fast, especially with Verstappen, but it became much more nervous and unpredictable in certain corner phases. Even Max himself has had to constantly correct oversteer and losses of rear stability on various circuits. McLaren wanted to avoid exactly that. And that's why Canada was so important. Because the package started in Miami was not designed solely to generate more downforce. The real goal was to completely reorganize the way the car managed airflow from the front to the diffuser. According to all the technical information that began to circulate within the paddock, McLaren modified critical areas of the car. The front wing, the geometry of the nose, the side pods, the floor, the flow inlet to the flat bottom, and the rear aerodynamic extraction. And this has enormous consequences. Because in today's cars, the real secret is not only to produce charge. The real challenge is keeping that load stable as the car changes altitude, speed, temperature, and fuel during a race. That's where most teams start to suffer. When the aerodynamic flow becomes unstable, the car loses balance, destroys tires, and forces the driver to constantly drive at the limit of error. But what Piastri began to feel in Canada was exactly the opposite. The Australian began to notice a much more progressive car, more stable in support, and especially more predictable in quick direction transitions. And although those statements seemed like simple comments from a driver, within the paddock they were interpreted differently. Because when a driver stops talking about surviving the car and starts talking about confidence, that usually means that the aerodynamic platform is actually working. And here appears the most terrifying detail for Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes. McLaren still does not appear to have reached the limit of the project. Andrea Stella explained that many of these modifications not only sought immediate performance, but also open new development routes for the future. That phrase is key, because it reveals that McLaren is already thinking about how to turn this aerodynamic philosophy into the basis of the 2026 era. And the more the behavior of the MCL40 is analyzed, the more sense the fear that is beginning to grow within Formula One makes. because the car is not only fast in one lap, it is beginning to show an even more dangerous characteristic: extreme consistency. In long simulations, tire management and pace stability, McLaren is starting to look like the type of teams that dominate entire regulation cycles. And that is precisely what worries rivals. Because when a team finds a stable, adaptable, and technically understandable platform, development stops being improvisation and becomes controlled evolution. And that's probably what Oscar Piastri ended up revealing without saying it directly. That McLaren is no longer reacting to the championship. The most worrying thing for the rest of the grid was not just McLaren's speed in Canada. It was the way they got it. Because when the first technical analyses began to appear after the weekend, several rival engineers came to an uncomfortable conclusion. The MCL40 was not performing as an extremely sensitive and difficult to control car, but as a surprisingly balanced aerodynamic platform. And that, in this generation of Formula One, is almost an anomaly. This is where Oscar Piastri's words begin to take on even more weight. Because the Australian hinted that the car now allowed corners to be attacked much more aggressively without feeling that constant instability that normally appears when the aerodynamic flow collapses. Put another way, McLaren found a way to keep the car glued to the asphalt without making it unpredictable. Because the MCL40 showed something extremely rare in this generation of single-seaters: consistent performance in different types of corners, stability under aggressive braking, the ability to conserve tires, and also a platform flexible enough to allow setup changes without destroying the balance of the car. That last detail is brutal, because most current equipment is trapped within very small windows of operation. If heights, loads, or aerodynamic distribution change, the car becomes unpredictable. That's why we often see very fast cars one weekend, and completely lost the next. McLaren is starting to look the opposite. And Oscar Piastri practically confirmed that feeling. Because the Australian began to convey something that we rarely hear in modern Formula One: calmness on the limit. The car now seems to respond exactly as the drivers expect. No violent reactions. No sudden load losses. Without that constant feeling of surviving every curve. And when a driver can fully trust the car, the true hidden rhythm appears. That's where the big differences arise. Because talent is no longer used to correct problems. It is used to maximize performance. And that can make Norris and Piastri an extremely dangerous duo for the coming years. Especially thinking about the new regulations. Because while many teams are still focused on surviving 2025, McLaren appears to be using this season as a laboratory to build the conceptual foundation for 2026. And that fits perfectly with Andrea Stella's statements about opening up new development opportunities and transforming virtually all fundamental areas of the car. They weren't just thinking about winning Canada. They were building a whole philosophy. And the more you analyze the behavior of the MCL40, the more evident something disturbing becomes. McLaren could be ahead in understanding the future regulations. Because Formula One in 2026 will greatly punish unstable cars. Energy efficiency will be more important than ever. Aerodynamic flow management will be critical. And teams will need extremely balanced platforms to avoid huge performance losses in traffic or fast corners. Exactly the kind of car McLaren seems to be developing right now. That's why Piastri's words made so much noise internally, because perhaps they accidentally revealed something much bigger than it seemed. That McLaren has already found extremely solid technical direction while others are still searching for answers. Ferrari continues to try to stabilize its performance windows. Red Bull continues to rely heavily on Verstappen to get the most out of a very difficult RB21 to drive. Mercedes has yet to convert its progress into real dominance. But McLaren begins to transmit the most dangerous feeling that can exist in Formula One. The feeling of a team that understands exactly what it is doing. And perhaps the most impressive thing about this whole story is that McLaren still does not seem to have shown its real ceiling. Because what started as a simple package of improvements between Miami and Canada ended up becoming something much bigger. The MCL40 didn't just gain speed. It gained balance, consistency, and an aerodynamic stability that begins to clearly differentiate it from the rest of the grid. And when Oscar Piastri began to reveal the confidence he now feels inside the car, many understood that this was no longer a normal seasonal improvement. It was a statement of technical power. And therein lies the real problem for Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes, because all of them are still fighting against structural limitations. Ferrari continues to rely too much on certain conditions to maximize performance. Red Bull continues to face an extremely aggressive car that is difficult to balance outside the ideal window. Mercedes is improving little by little, but it still does not convey the feeling of absolute dominance. Meanwhile, McLaren appears to be entering a completely different phase. The phase where a team stops chasing solutions and begins to deeply understand how to build championship cars. And that can change everything towards 2026. Because if they really found an aerodynamic platform that was flexible, stable, and adaptable to future regulations, then Canada could end up being remembered as much more than just a race. It could have been the exact moment McLaren began building Formula One's next great dynasty. And perhaps Oscar Piastri revealed much more than he imagined. Because when a pilot transmits that calmness, that confidence, and that naturalness to the limit, it usually means only one thing: that behind the wheel there is no longer just a fast car. There is a project that is starting to look scary. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.